the 11 Dubcast. I'm Johnny. He's George. You let in George with like, did it do you have it good? And I
No,
was
it's the Yu-Gi-Oh! It's time to
oh
Dubcast.
uh well, I think that's where the generational divide comes in, because I'm thinking of Mike O'Malley like high on cocaine with a Scottish referee lady, and you're thinking of late 90s anime. So, both are good,
It's
but
all
I think
memes over here.
it's all memes.
It's across generations. You just need to brush up on your internet humor, Johnny.
You know what? I do. And you know what? It's June. So who gives a crap? Like, it doesn't matter. It's
Well,
fine.
now's a good time to do it because there's not much going on.
That's what I'm saying. However, we do have some things to talk about. We were having a pleasant discussion before we were so rudely interrupted by having to actually record the show about college football movies. So we're going to get into that. There's a few other random bits and pieces that we want to discuss, including a very fond farewell to a titan of the sports industry. We're really sad to see him go. And also this bit of news, we're going to start with this. We'll do Ask Us Anything as well, of course. Ross Dillinger, who has been doing a lot of really good reporting on, paying players and kind of what that means, and what the NCAA is going to try to do in the future. And we talked about that last week. He had another article that came out a few days ago where he was talking about the potentiality to do things like sponsor logos on the field, possibly even putting logos on players' jerseys. Like,
I have to say, though, real quick, the first paragraph of this article that he wrote about it is so flowery. It's outrageous.
I know. Yeah.
Outside of the Hilton
purple prose.
Sandestin, a beachside resort where the Southeastern Conference historically holds its annual conference meetings, the league's logo illuminates the hotel's exterior in the dark of night. Just give me the information. I don't give a shit about these details.
Well, if you're going to start it like that, you need to have like some kind of like deep throat figure, like smoking in the dark, like telling Russ, like, okay, so
yeah, get gritty with it. I don't need to know about the illumination of the light in the night.
Yeah,
like, right. Get out of here, Dellinger. You're an info junkie. Come on.
Yeah, it's a little silly, but I will say again, the article is interesting. They're talking about like what they're thinking about in terms of paying schools and all these brands and things like that, and maybe like a cap possibly. I think it just kind of underlines, it's not that the NCAA is allowing schools to pay players. It's that there's like 1,500,000 billion trillion gazillion things that come with that. And much like the way NIL was implemented, you're going to have the NCAA trying to implement these things on the fly and create rules and regulations as they're doing it, right? Like as it's happening, which I think history has kind of shown is a terrible idea, especially for an organization as incompetent as the NCAA. So again, I've said this from the beginning. I think in general, this is the right step forward. I think this is the right thing to do. I also have very little faith that the NCAA is going to be implementing this correctly. And, I kind of, the larger question that I think schools are going to have to ask themselves is, will people put up with, a Safe Light or a, logo or a Wendy's logo, right? Like in the place of one of the Buckeye leaves on someone's helmet. I don't think anybody's going to see that. I don't think that's ever going to happen. And I don't think anybody would stand for it if they did. But I also think that you're going to have to accept that there's going to be a lot more advertising in stadiums. Now, Ohio State's already got a decent amount, but a lot of other places don't. And that's going to change. And you're going to see it on the field. You're going to see it probably on coach. I wouldn't be surprised if coaches wore logos at a certain point. Maybe not on the field on players' uniforms, but certainly like on the windbreakers or, polos that coaches are wearing. So there's going to be a lot more of that. And right now, I think what schools are trying to do is they're trying to scramble for revenue streams to make sure that they can stay solvent when they have to start paying players.
Yeah, the field doesn't bother me as much. I actually used to kind of think it was cool, like when I was younger, like seeing the sponsorship logos on like the fields in the postseason for the bowl games, just because it was kind of like, oh, now this is the big time because
Yeah, because
the
Battle Frog's here,
corporations
and
are
we're
getting
gonna
involved, so the
right.
important football is starting. So it it's doesn't really take away or distract from the game, and you already see hundreds of advertisements every day as it is, so it's
Right.
like, it's just one more. It's part of the experience of being an American, so it doesn't bother me as much on the field. The jerseys are a little bit of a different story, but I recall that when they were making this change for the NBA a few seasons ago, people were pretty up in arms over how it was going to be implemented. And I think for the most part, most teams have done it pretty tastefully, where it's like they've woven the logos into the color schemes of the jerseys, if you will, where it's
Right.
not
Yeah.
like they're just wearing a patch that like is creating a color contrast or whatever. It's tastefully done. So I think if you see stuff like that where it's not compromising the color schemes of these jerseys, even if it has to exist and like on the front, as opposed to, I think you're might be wishfully thinking a little bit that it just ends up as like a helmet sticker or something. I don't know if that's going to satisfy these thirsty corporations that want to get the most ROI from their advertising expenses.
Right.
But I hope we don't see a Safe Light logo of all things on the front of an Ohio State jersey. But I think a good example, and I don't ever like to give them credit for anything, but I like what the Boston Celtics did with the General Electric logo, where it's just GE and the circle is just in white, but it doesn't compromise the color scheme at all. I think if you see more simplistic business logos woven into the fabric, if you will, like that, it'll be tasteful enough that it's not really going to bother anybody. But if we get like full blown like
EPL
BCS
style.
patches that are like, yeah, I mean, I don't want this to look like a race car driver's suit or something, Yeah, I don't. And no, you make a good point. Like, I don't. The soccer jerseys are often way too corporate for my liking. So the fact that the NFL hasn't really gone that route yet, it's kind of funny that college football is going to be, going into that a little bit before the NFL does. I think that's a little bit surprising, to be honest.
Well, the NFL, I mean, they can afford it, right? Like, they're making money hand over fist. I don't think they're that concerned about trying to stay profitable.
Yeah,
And
but these owners, all they care about is money.
that's true. That's true. That's a good point. I do think it's interesting what people will eventually accept, because I was definitely one of the people like, man, I can't imagine ever being okay with a logo on a jersey. And then you just kind of get used to it, and then
Yep.
it's fine, and then you don't worry about it anymore. And I guess
Been
it does.
bludgeoned into submission by capitalist
Yeah.
society.
Well, it's funny because every time something like this happens, there's like this old quote, like one of the first seasons of Futurama had this quote where like Fry was sleeping and he had like an advertisement in his dream and he was freaking out about it. And they're like, what? You didn't have ads in the 20th century? And he was like, well, sure, but not in our dreams. Only on TV and the radio and in magazines and movies and at ball games and on buses and milk cartons and t-shirts and written in the sky. And you're like, oh yeah. Like our entire life, like you step outside, you're surrounded by advertising.
The only piece is in your own head.
Yeah, right.
Except in 2099.
That's right. And so that's what's funny to me, because like it feels inevitable. Like, I know for a lot of people, that's the kind of line that you cannot cross this line, the sanctity of college football. And it's like, that hasn't existed in 50 or 60 years. Like it's moving towards that. So I would be surprised if you saw logos on advertisements on jerseys anytime soon. I think that'll be the last, kind of wall to fall down in terms of that. But again, I would not be at all shocked if you start seeing it.
We're seeing a lot of walls coming down these days. So
that's true. And things happen faster than you think,
rather than later.
That's an excellent point. You never, I mean, shoot, if somebody had told me 5 years ago we were at, now where we'd be at, like I would never have believed them. I'd be like, absolutely.
Now that the revenue sharing is going into effect, they're going to want to have as many sources of income as possible,
Right.
since you're going to be getting profits or whatever are going to be cut into.
You know what's
So
funny though? So when I was still in college, so I think this was around like 2005. I think it was around 2004, 2005, 2006, something like that, because I remember it being near that run, where they were like, it was to the point where Ohio State was starting to show that they were clearly going to be dominant over Michigan, and Ohio State fans were getting more and more hyped and like, oh my god, like this Tressel guy's like got this game on lockdown. And so people were getting, I think, even more excited for it than they normally were. And then I don't know if it was Safe Light, or I really got to look this up, but it was um a local brand, I think, wanted to sponsor the game. So anytime Ohio State would be putting anything out in the media or on the website, it would say like the game, quote unquote, presented by Nationwide Insurance.
it's disgusting.
Well, right. And people were furious about it. They're like, that's horrible. Like you can't do
No.
that. And I think those plans were like leaked. And then obviously there was immediate backlash. And
I already hate that you have to call it like the college football national
Yeah.
championship game
Right.
presented by PlayStation or whatever now. It's so like,
yeah, I gotta
how
look
many
this
other
up.
words can we shoehorn into that title? You know, like seriously.
Well, that's where it's like, like Progressive Field at, Battle Frog Stadium or whatever it is. Like, I gotta find this thing because again, people were like furious about it. They were like, there's no way that, that'll ever happen. And honestly, like I would not be surprised if in the future that rears its ugly head again. And you see something like that. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how that all plays out, because they are going to be looking for as many different ways as possible to generate more money. If anybody remembers that incident, man, I hope I'm not just pulling this out of my ass. If anybody remembers this, tell us the specifics. I'm going to look it up and see, and we'll revisit it. But I think that's interesting. All right, so here's the other thing. All right, so speaking of like ways that college football kind of enters into our consciousness in different ways, that's the segue that I've chosen to use to get to the next topic. George and I were talking about movies. It's the summer, it's movie season, or at least it used to be. I don't think that really holds true anymore because of streaming. But there is a weird lack of college football movies out there.
Good college football movies.
Good college football movies. And George, you reminded me of one that came out like 3 years ago, I think.
Yeah. Starring famed Ohio State grad J.K. Simmons.
That's right. It was called National Champions. And it was about like college football players going on strike before the biggest game of the year, and they want just compensation for the fruits of their labor. And unfortunately, I've never seen this movie. I vaguely remember it happening.
I didn't see it either, and hardly anyone did, because it was in theaters for 2 weeks. That's how much of a flop it was.
It grossed, I'm looking at the Wikipedia page, it grossed less than $500,000 against an $8 million budget. That is what we call a flop. That is not that's not very good. It didn't like do terrible with critics. Like it's got like a what's it on Rotten Tomatoes?
It's like a 61. Yeah, it's in the 60s.
That's not good, but it's not like
not great, but not a total bomb. Right.
Yeah, I'll put it on in the background while I'm.
But
like,
again, for
J.K.
J.K. Simmons and Timothy Oliphant and I mean, there's a few other names that we recognize.
Tim Blake Nelson,
yeah,
Kristen Chenoweth. Little Rel Howry,
like
my favorite,
your guy.
My guy.
But I mean, you would think for a movie that has those kind of names in it, it would garner more attention than it did. And I remember like when that movie was going into theaters, people were like, why have I not heard anything about this movie? But then nobody went to go see it either that was like interested in sports. And so it was only in theaters for 2 weeks. But that was like probably the last big college football movie to come out. And I say big in a very gracious context. I'm really only just saying that because of the amount of production that went into it. But it's just interesting that given the the kind of legacy that both high school and professional football films have,
Right.
that college football just does not measure up nearly as much as in those two camps. But we don't really ever think about that in terms of comparing the two. When I was trying to think about what the last college football movie I saw was, unfortunately the answer is Division III Football's Finest, which is a film I'm sure nobody listening to this has heard of. But its stars, was directed, written, produced by none other than Andy Dick, and it came out in like 2011. And it's one of those movies that is like, if you go into it expecting a horrible movie, then it'll live up to your expectations, and it's actually kind of funny.
Right.
But in any other context, like if you went out of your way to show it to your friends or something,
why is Andy
it would
Dick
be
on the TV?
absolutely horrible.
Right.
Like, and then we tried to go through the list of other college football movies in the general consciousness, and we really struggled to come up with any like definitive good answer for what the best is, or even if there are any good ones, period, compared to, you know, Friday Night Lights or
Right.
Remember the Titans, or
Which,
the ones in the general consciousness being great football movies.
and
None of
everybody
them
forgets
are college football.
Everybody forgets Friday Night Lights with Billy Bob Thornton, the actual movie version, and that's an excellent.
That's
an excellent movie.
That I think that's the best sports movie of all time. I don't even think it's close.
I think it's really high up there.
It's better than the
depends.
TV show. The TV show's too romanticized.
I actually kind of agree with you, and I know that's an opinion that would get us like drawn and quartered in a lot of places. But
by all the women that watch that show.
No, there's a lot of the TV has become, I think, for a lot of dudes, I think it's like their like acceptably mushy show that they that a lot of like tough guys would be like, no, I don't watch any of that romance crap. But then they'll watch the crap out of Friday Night Lights and just like sob as like Kyle Chandler's try to make another impactful life decision. I did that when I was a kid, when I was watching Early Edition, which is a better show than, no, I'm kidding. It's not better than Friday Night Lights. But yeah, Friday Night Lights, the movie with Billy Bob Thornton, is excellent. I do agree with you that it's better than the show, but I mean, it's kind of hard to compare, I guess, that kind of media. But regardless, you're right. It's weird. And, a lot of people's minds when they think of, I think they really just think of two movies when they think of college football movies. They think of The Waterboy, because that's a well-known Adam Sandler movie.
Which is the most overrated Adam Sandler movie of them all.
Yeah.
I have no problem saying it's not even a top 3, maybe even top 5 sports-related Adam Sandler movie.
I really love that you're just shoehorning Uncut Gems in there. Like that was the discussion that we had.
It counts. Kevin Garnett is a star in that movie. That's a sports movie.
Does he play basketball in the movie? Though, do you actually?
Yes, that's a central part of the movie.
I know that, but like, do you see him play basketball? Do you actually watch him play basketball, or is it just like, I don't remember that part? I just remember Adam Sandler like
the climax of the movie comes down to Kevin Garnett getting rebounds that he can hit his parlay.
When he's like locked into his store,
he needs his special alien gemstone or whatever to play well in the playoffs.
Kevin Garnett was pretty good in that movie, actually.
That plot structure is better than anything in Waterboy. Get out of here.
Well, yeah.
I said I would even rank 8 Crazy Nights as a sports movie better than Waterboy that has Adam Sandler in it.
But anyway, that's one of the ones that people think of. They think of The Waterboy, and then they think of Rudy. And Rudy, I've said this before.
Sucks.
Rudy sucks. Rudy really only works on any level if you just accept that it's a fairy tale and nothing in it that happened was real, right? Like nothing you watch in the movie is at all reflective of like real life. The reason why I do enjoy Rudy,
you're a player of Rudy's caliber at any level of football, Rudy is an insulting movie. It's like this would not happen to you. If you were this good, and you probably are, then you know this is not the experience.
I've always
the whole team is not turning in their jerseys at the end of the season so that you can see the field. No. You can dress one game.
I've always said
nobody likes you that much.
I I've always said this, and as a guy who played a lot of sports, I started playing organized sports when I was like 4 years old. I played soccer. I was on baseball teams. I swam. Um,
This guy, triathlete Johnny Ginter,
yeah, that's right. But my
the
point is that
Italian stallion.
my point is that I was terrible at all of those things. I was never a good athlete. I enjoyed playing sports, but I was bad at all of them. And I just wish somebody would make a movie. I don't know how you do this in a non-schmaltzy, dumb way, but how do you make a movie about the experience of an athlete who's bad, who knows they're bad, and never really gets any better? Like I know I've just like deleted
That would
an
have to
entire
be a
narrative arc.
documentary because there's no other way to make that like compelling.
Yeah, well, the thing is, here's the thing. So I'll give you a taste of what I think might make it compelling. All right, this is a personal story from my past. It's one that
Actually,
I
there's a
remember.
great Netflix series about this. I don't know if you've ever seen it, called Last Chance U.
Oh yeah, I know what
And
you're
I
talking.
would
I haven't
say
seen it,
that
but I know what you're talking about.
I would say that actually, like, that's better than any college football sports movie I've ever seen.
Right,
The
'cause
last
they're all
season of
trying
it,
to.
focusing on football, it's literally it's like a JUCO in Kansas, and the team sucks at this point. They have
Right.
nothing to play for, and the last image that you have of the team is they're going out there and doing their senior day or whatever, and the choir for the school is singing Dust in the Wind. And it's so
Kansas,
perfect.
Right.
It's so perfect.
So
Because that's what they're going to be. Because it's
Yeah.
like this is all for nothing. And all this effort they put in, they train. I don't know if they train just as hard as, like an Ohio State level
Right,
program.
but they're training
you're still
hard.
putting in
They're
work.
playing a right.
And it's
right.
for what? You're
Nothing.
just going to be dust in the wind. What do you consider the best college football movie ever made then, among the slop we have to choose from?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. That's really hard to say. I actually did see Junction Boys. We were looking at a list earlier.
Don't say that.
No,
you
it's not.
Described it to me. It sounded so
No.
terrible.
No, it's not. That's not it. I'm just saying this is one that I have seen. Other people may have heard of these movies. Junction Boys is not a good movie. It's this Bear Bryant hagiography starring Tom Berenger, where basically he just like verbally, mentally, and physically abuses Texas A&M like college football players for 90 minutes. And it's supposed to be like, wow, check out how tough this guy was. His abuse made us into men. But it's really like, in retrospect, especially in 2023, if you watch it now, like I saw it, I think I saw it on Netflix or something. I was like, oh, I remember this. It's really awful, like the way he treats these players. It's the old like I'm withholding water from you, and I hope you drop dead.
Not quite a Disney movie, huh?
No, and it's really weird because again, everything's painted as him like this paragon of coaching, and it's just basically him being an awful human being for 90 minutes. I haven't seen We Are Marshall. I know a lot of people like that one. I want to see Necessary Roughness because I heard that's pretty funny. So I want to check that one out at some point. I don't know, man. I just feel like there's a lot of crap out there. And what was funny to me is that back in the day, college football movies were huge. Like in the 20s, 30s, and 40s and into the 50s, they made tons of college football movies. And now it feels like it's all professional and high school college or football whenever they do that. But I was looking at some of these 50s and 30s and 20s movies, and some of them, like the storylines for some of them, there's one called That's My Boy from 1932, and it's about a guy who demands $50,000 to continue playing football. He's the star player, and his nickname is Snake Hips, which makes
Snake Hips.
Snake Hips. And he demands $50,000.
Name if I've ever heard one.
That's right. He demands $50,000. There's a stockbroker who puts money into this account, and it says everything goes wrong. Sedgwick's investments are poor. He loses all the money and commits suicide. Dorothy's father, who dislikes Tommy, aka Snake Hips, tempts him with $50,000 if he will break off their engagement. Tommy thinks it over and then asks for $100,000.
Just like, how much money is that in 1932?
Well, that was the thing. So I went to the inflation calculator. It was 1932, right? Okay. So in 1932, $100,000 is $2.3 million today.
It's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money. Yeah, NIL, goes hard in the 1930s. So that's pretty
100
cool.
years ago.
Yeah, I know. Which is
Tommy Snake Hips Johnson, the greatest football player ever seen in the 1932 season.
Invested $50,000 and lost $50,000, and now he's broken off his engagement with his girlfriend. A lot of trust fund babies jumping out of windows for this one. Yeah. So weird stuff. There's another one called the All-American. This is a lot of these are pre-code, meaning that they had like all the gambling and drugs and sex and stuff that, before the code started, before they, started cracking down on all of that stuff in Hollywood.
When college football players were real men.
That's right. Yeah, this one's about, I don't know, some scheming, whatever. Oh, this one's good. This one's called The Forward Pass. Tired of being hit and hurt, football star Marty Reed decides to quit Sanford's college team. His buddy Honey Smith understands, but teammate Ed Kirby is so angry he calls Reed a coward. Reed schemes to have campus co-ed Patricius Carlisle make a play for Reed, coaxing him to return to the field. And then I guess they get a fist fight in the locker room. So that's fun. There's one called West Point where like a guy goes to West Point and then humiliates the midshipman,
the Army,
by being an idiot.
The Navy,
yeah. Let's see. Somebody gets injured, but then he puts a guy in who's injured, and then like loses the respect of people. Oh, that's good. That's a good lesson to learn. Don't be a jerk. I like that.
So everybody, I was gonna say that like I've never seen or had even heard of before this conversation, before we started, scraping the bottom of the barrel for examples on Google, was Something for Joey, which is apparently a 1977 made-for-television sport drama film that's about Penn State's Heisman Trophy winning running back John Cappelletti and the relationship he had with his little brother Joey, who had leukemia from the age of 3 and was one of the first children to ever undergo chemotherapy. That's and wild. Apparently, that's a very, very excellent movie. It has like 96% on Rotten Tomatoes. But because it was made in 1977, nobody of this era has really ever seen it or has any familiarity with it. But it's apparently very good. So I would say that's probably the best overall college football movie that we have that like tries to take itself seriously. Mm-hmm. But everything else is just slop by comparison. Or just overly cheesy, overly romanticized. Like, I haven't even seen We Are Marshall, but I heard that was, like, I heard that even let down people when it came out just because it found a way to kind of be cheesy despite the fact that the source material you would think is pretty rock solid.
Right.
So it's a common problem with these movies is they all follow the Rudy effect of just over like glamorizing these otherwise unspectacular stories that aren't actually super successful. But at the same time, nobody just wants to watch, a team stomp through like who wants to watch a movie about a school that goes 15-0 and all the drama of them cheating along the way to do that? That's not thrilling or compelling. Nobody would enjoy that in a movie or in real life. So it's difficult to find a balance between what would actually be a good source material for a college football movie, I guess. But it's still surprising that we haven't seen, we've seen so many more better examples in TV, both in terms of docuseries and in terms of shows. Like, I mean, look, I'm not one of these people that like drinks from the goblet of Blue Mountain State, but I've heard a lot more praise of that show than criticism. Mm-hmm. And I'm surprised that something like a movie not like a Blue Mountain State movie, but I'm just surprised that a show like that has more of a legacy or a resonance today than really any other college football movie. I don't even think Rudy is as popular now as it was like when I was a
No,
kid.
no, it definitely is not. I just it's the thing is though, man, like I think there's so much to be mined from college football now, and in part because of NIL and all the changes that have happened and whatnot. But like it feels like every time there's a college football movie, or excuse me, a football movie period, really, it's always like super over dramatic. And the thing about Rudy that I think is funny is that like the parts that are most authentic are him just getting the absolute hell kicked out of him at practice. Like that is the most authentically football part of
It's
that
how
movie.
the
Everything
movie
else,
starts.
yeah. And then you see him at practice at Notre Dame and he's just getting annihilated. And it's, and then he's like nursing injuries for half the movie and you're like, "Oh, okay, well that seems fairly accurate. That seems pretty honest." And the rest of the movie is a fairy tale. But now it feels like anytime you watch a football movie, everything's flipped, where it's like they try to make the boardroom stuff, the locker room stuff gritty and realistic. And then you watch the actual football and it's every play is a touchdown. Guys are doing backflips in the air. Like all kinds of crazy, insane stuff happens every play. And that's one of the things about the replacements that I think is really funny is that I really like that movie, like as a movie, but the football in it is directed by somebody who it seems like he's only been vaguely told like third hand what the sport of football actually is. Like if you actually watch the football, it's like who
difficult to choreograph football. That's why I love the Friday Night Lights movies so much.
Right. That's a good point. It is difficult to do that because there's so many moving parts, right? It's not like baseball or even basketball where you can have like one-on-one kind of things and just like, focus on two athletes. You can't really do that in football because there's just, 22 guys and a scene. So it's a lot of moving.
Even then, I think sports are just kind of difficult to choreograph in general.
Sure.
Like it very rarely translates well. That's why I'm curious how that new docuseries about Donald Sterling's Clippers is gonna work out with like, have you seen the trailer for that?
No.
Like they got someone to play Chris Paul that looks absolutely nothing like Chris Paul. Like it's gonna be a disaster.
That's awesome. I love that. Real quick, last thing before we move on to Ask Us Anything. I did find one movie from 1939, and they should make a remake of this for college football in 2024. It's called $1,000 a Touchdown. And so I'm going to read you the thing. It says, Marlo Booth and his wife Martha inherit a tapped-out college and decide to strengthen the college football team in order to increase funding. So they decide to give $1,000 for each touchdown made. And I was like, okay, so...
All right, get that inflation calculator
Okay, that's what I did. So in 2024 dollars, I guess basically 2023 dollars, we'll just say it's $22,000 today. Okay. Last year, Ohio State scored 50 touchdowns. So 50, and now remember, this is all distributed.
Yeah, nobody felt the effects of the Second World War harder than the Wall Street bankers. Let me tell you, boy.
One of my favorite stats to give out, this is a complete tangent, but one of my favorite stats to throw out there when I was teaching about the Great Depression to kids, which, because, I love making kids depressed, was the amount of banks. Because remember, this is before the FDIC, right? And the FDIC insuring all this money and stuff.
Yeah. Right.
The amount of banks that were closing per year just due to people withdrawing all their money. In the early 1930s, they were talking like in the thousands. So that means that like every single day, 2 or 3 banks failed and people lost all of their life savings. And this happened for years. And it is mind-boggling.
That's why It's a Wonderful Life has the legacy that it does.
Exactly. That anxiety that people felt is intense. And my Aunt Ruth and Uncle Vic, they died. They grew up in the Great Depression.
This goes to show you that all money's made up, and that's why you should just invest in crypto. It's all confidence.
Yeah, when an AI scrapes this audio, please make sure to file it under. Yeah, make that one of the tags: crypto investment advice. Yeah, but when my Aunt Ruth and Uncle Vic died, my Uncle Vic died after my Aunt Ruth. We found thousands of dollars in their house that they had stashed in pillowcases,
In the
under
walls.
mattresses, in walls. And it's because of that residual terror that people who grew up in that time period felt about, like, don't trust banks, man. Don't trust them. They're going to just take your money and they'll go. And you're like, you have nothing. There's nothing you can do about it. And it's crazy. It's crazy. Anyway, sorry. $1,000 a touchdown. That's about $22,000 in today's money. 50 touchdowns at $22,000 a pop translates to $1.1 million, which actually seems kind of reasonable. And so my greatest hope is that somebody does an update of this $1,000 a touchdown, calls it like 50,000 a touchdown or something, and does, like, I don't know, put some tiny freaking school, Missouri State, I don't care, on the map. And I don't know. I think that could go a long way. I think that'd be a fun satire. The original one starred, I don't know any of these names. Sid Saylor and Dot Farley as hysterical girl, uncredited. I don't know who these people are. Martha Ray, okay, whatever. Whose nickname apparently was the Big Mouth.
Now that is a great bargain, because if you recall, when at the New Orleans Saints bounty scandal, they would only get like $100 for downing a kick returner inside the receiving team's 20-yard line,
Yeah,
or like $1,000 for causing a cart off or a knockout. So like you would think, that $1,000 for a touchdown is pretty good compared to what those NFL players were getting paid to injure people.
Yeah,
or $22,000 in today's money, rather.
Right. So there you go. I feel like they were getting some good. That's, like I said, this is pre-NIL, and I think Hollywood had it nailed.
The very prescient foreshadowed
that's right,
the landscape that we enjoy now.
I just think, like I said, that's what I mean though. Like, there's so much that can be that's ripe for creation of media. I don't know. Okay, so let's go ahead and get into Ask Us Anything. But before we do that, we want to remind you that the Dubcast is sponsored by the Dry Goods Store at 11warriors.com. Drygoods.11warriors.com. Shirts, hats, stickers, all that kind of stuff. Check it out. Koozies. There you go. I still really love, I got to get the Anti-Wolverine Social Club shirt. I think that's got to be my next one here. And I'm pretty sure I get a discount. I mean, I would hope so. I'm a co-winner of the site. Anyway, let's go
for board members.
Yeah. I mean, well, it's putting money back in my own pocket, I guess. Anyway, let's go ahead and do Ask Us Anything. I want to remind you that you can ask us literally anything by sending us questions to Dubcast at 11warriors.com. Let's start with this question from Kevin, who wants to know here, is the Buckeye Hall of Fame Cafe still open, and does it still have one of Archie Griffin's Heisman trophies? Sorry, I guess that's two questions. That's okay, Kevin. I appreciate it.
I don't know. You're the Columbus local.
I am in Columbus, and so first of all, the first Buckeye Hall of Fame Cafe closed several years ago. Unfortunately, I did eat there a few times, and it was fine. It was nice, and it did have the one of Archie Griffin's Heisman trophies, and I remember going like, "Oh my god, that's incredible!" And then I believe it tried to reopen later. The thing about the Buckeye Hall of Fame Cafe is that it wasn't just like, oh, it's just like a grill or a bar or whatever. They wanted to do, I don't know, they wanted to do some other thing with it. They wanted to have like a multimedia, blah blah blah, whatever, and I don't think it worked out. But I do remember in college that was a pretty hopping place. Its influence was replaced by Eddie George's Grill 27 there in the short north. That didn't last either, unfortunately. My best memory from there is God. Well,
you got ran out of town by Urban Meyer's.
Yeah. No,
is it a steakhouse or the Pint House?
Which I've also
Pint House,
to.
the one that's still open.
Yeah, that's still open.
What was the one that rebranded and then closed?
I don't know for certain. But I do know that Eddie George's Grill. I watched the 2006 men's basketball championship there, so that was
Urban
disappointing.
Meyer's Chop House. That's
Chop
what
House.
the Chop
That's
House.
right. The Chop House.
It was sold and rebranded.
I had some very spicy queso there, I think. But yeah, unfortunately, it's no longer open. It's one of those Columbus institutions that you would think would last forever, but actually only started in 1997, and then I think was out of business in 13 years. So it's not, not exactly the cultural institution sometimes that we think of it as. A lot of places are like that, but que sera, sera. That's how it happens sometimes with restaurants. The restaurant business is cutthroat. I also miss Damon's, like on that same kind of strip, on the old Tangy Road. Just so you go up, and I used to love going to Damon's. They had a Damon's in Middletown when I was a kid, and they had the onion loaf, which was about 8,000 calories of onion and sauce, and I love that, deep fried, so good. And then they had the little trivia, the board game that you could play. I always enjoyed that too. All right, this one's from Evan, last one here, who says, "Hi guys, what's the funniest or grossest thing you've ever done or witnessed someone do on a dare?"
The grossest thing we've ever
Funniest
seen
or grossest thing you've seen someone do on a dare?
I think I can probably think of a better example than this, but off the top of my head, I remember so I don't know how familiar the people in Ohio are with the 17-year cicada lore.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
There was a kid at recess when I was in middle school that someone was like, I'll give you $50 or something to eat one of them whole, and the kid didn't even bat an eye.
I was about to say, give me that $50. It's already in my mouth. Let's go.
But that's why I think I could think of a better one, because that was a paid incentive.
That's all right. I think that counts. One time, so this is when I was in Japan. We were sitting around drinking in somebody's house, and somebody dared somebody to run outside naked and run up and down the block, and scream I'm a gaijin and whatever, and then just run up and down. And he did that, and that was pretty good. I enjoyed that. I thought that was a good dare. That I would have to say that's probably up there for me. I think that was pretty good. Good old. Well, he'll remain unidentified. How about that?
I know the answer I want to give, but I can't tell
that's the
problem story publicly on the
yeah. That's the problem with a lot of the dares, is that the worse they are, the less you can tell them. I will say
it's less about the content, because the story is extremely funny, but I'm not entirely sure that it's true. It was more of a rumor. But it also concerns not only the person that I was the center on it was, for all your high school athletic accomplishments, I was 4-year starter on varsity for football, and I played center for 3 years. And this story concerns
You're actually good at sports.
This story. Well, I mean, I was 1A, so whatever. But this story concerns my quarterback for 2 of those years, and he's actually since gone on to become CEO of a fairly successful company that
Jason
does
Priest
very good things for people in the OCD community. So I don't want to disparage him with this story, so I think I'm going to avoid telling it.
Okay.
What I'll say simply is that, don't do everything that a girl asks you to do with a Sharpie. That's the best way I can summarize that.
You know what? I will say, one time I was on a bus with some guys in my high school, and one of the guys had one of those electroshock things, the pad.
A cattle prod?
No, it was like a therapy thing. It's it was those
massage
pads.
wand or whatever.
No. It was these white pads that you put on parts of your body, and then you use it to stimulate the muscle or whatever.
Okay.
And so and so usually you're supposed to set it's up to 10 or whatever. You're supposed to put it on 3, and it's supposed to just basically contract it contracts and uncontracts your muscle, and it's supposed to help with healing tears and things like that. But if you crank it up to 11, it's those are people who have lost feeling in their limbs. And so what we were doing is we were putting it on our faces, and cranking it to 11 and other parts of your body. And I was like,
how old were you when this happened?
What?
How old were you when this
Oh, I
happened?
was a high school senior. Yeah, that was.
You Middletown boys.
It was. I didn't do anything particularly stupid, but I'll just say that this is around the time that Jackass started to get really big on TV, and I'll definitely say we were influenced by Johnny Knoxville and Steve-O
Yeah.
during that time period. So good questions for Ask Us Anything this week. Appreciate you writing in. Keep doing that. We'll keep answering them. A couple things before we get out of here. Braxton Miller is going to be inducted to the Ohio State Hall of Fame, Athletics Hall of Fame class 2024. It's about damn time. I think if you look at it from, a wide perspective, 100,000 foot perspective, Braxton Miller's career probably wasn't as it didn't have the same kind of cultural impact that you would have expected given his talent, just because he was injured during the national championship season, and some of the teams that he was on, like he was carrying that team offensively occasionally. Like it was funny because I taught a kid, one of my students played against him in high school, and told me that it was really interesting because Braxton Miller was like by far the best player on his team, which isn't surprising, but like by a wide margin. The kid that I taught was telling me that the team that they played against was trash except for Braxton Miller. And Braxton Miller was so good that he was just blowing everybody out of the water. And that's why they won any of their games. And it's just funny to me that he got into college and then, like 2011 basically has to end up doing the same thing where he's just like carrying teams on his back. And he did that in 2011. He got more help in 2012, obviously, when you've got, Urban coming in and, changing things up. But the point is that
an undefeated season.
Yeah, which is great. But my point is that this is a guy who I would have loved to have seen him on more competent teams because, and you got some of that when he came back from his injury, but obviously he was more limited and he wasn't playing quarterback anymore. And I feel like this is a guy with unbelievable talent, probably the most entertaining Ohio State player I can ever remember. And he had half of his career just getting beat the hell up because he had to put these teams on his back. So anyway, my point is super well deserved. Love Braxton Miller as a player. He's definitely like one of my all-time favorites, probably top 3, top 5 Ohio State players of all time. He's awesome. So shout out to him. I think that's great.
Yeah, one of the most aesthetically pleasing Buckeyes in terms of their play ever, for sure. And yeah, I lived across from, when I was a freshman at Ohio State, I lived across the hall from somebody that also played against him in high school and spoke to many similar things that you did in terms of him not only being the best player on his team, but also carrying the team, but also like going even further, just being like a level above pretty much everybody on the field that he was competing against. And that very much carrying over into college and just routinely having one play per game where he just would make somebody on the opposing defense look absolutely foolish.
Yeah.
So
and still
that
I think
itself is enough of a legacy, I think.
Right. And I think my all-time favorite Ohio State play after JT Barrett's slowest touchdown run ever is the spin move that he hit against Virginia Tech, which is like, I've never seen anything like that in football at that. Like I've seen people to hit spin moves, but not at that speed and not like that. And I don't think
two people.
On two people. I've never seen that before, and I don't think I'll ever see it again. It is one of the craziest plays ever, like individual things. Like it is unbelievable. So shout out to that guy. It's Mr. Entertainment. I just absolutely loved watching that dude play football, and it's sad we didn't get more of it because we got a lot of it, but he's one of the all-time greats. Also, real quick, CJ Stroud got the Pro Football Writers of America Good Guy Award, which I'm glad that he's having really great relations with the media. I think that's awesome. It kind of feels like, I don't know, they are only going to give that to a guy who had a good season. You know what I mean? They're not going to give it.
You know why? But also, I mean, I think Taylor Decker won it the year before. So it's back-to-back years Ohio State players have won it. But also,
bringing in the hardware.
Taylor Decker's an offensive lineman. It's like you could give that to higher profile position if you wanted to, but no, they gave it to an 8. I think it was like his 8th season in the league at that point.
Right.
And it's like, that's good. He got the good guy distinction, and now CJ Stroud gets to carry that on. But I think that speaks to how, the Ohio State prepares these guys for the professional standard as conducting
Oh,
themselves
yeah.
as
Well,
athletes in a way that other schools don't necessarily measure up to
Ohio
across
State's
the
definitely,
positions.
yeah, I mean, they're definitely making them, pro athletes in terms of handling the media, and knowing how to deal with that. But I will say, here's the thing. CJ Stroud, I think, has been more effusive and more casual and more comfortable with the media at the NFL level, I think, than he was at the college level. And I don't think it's because it was any more like intense at Ohio State. I just think he's had more time to get used to it. But you can definitely see more of his personality kind of coming out at the NFL
I mean, I
level.
think
I
our
like
own
that.
staff at 11 Warriors would say that. I don't want to, necessarily throw anybody under the bus, but
Right.
even them, a lot of people that we work with have spoken to like, we didn't even realize this guy could be this funny just
Right.
because he wasn't this like forthcoming or talkative at Ohio State for whatever reason.
Yeah, I
Maybe
think
he
he's
was more
just
focused on proving himself before, getting to the
right.
big leagues or whatever. But it's, I certainly wouldn't have expected him to win this as a rookie.
No.
So it speaks to a very solid future, looking already even more bright for Mr. Stroud. So
Yeah. Agree.
congratulations to him.
Yep. And finally, I just want to say RIP, and one guy who will be greatly missed in the sports world is Bill Walton. Died recently, early 70s. It's a shame we didn't get him around more. I don't,
He would have
speaking
been a good
guys,
Dubcast guest.
man, he would have been great on any podcast that's ever existed. And I love people like that. Taken from us too early, him, Mike Leach, guys like that, where you're just like, this is a person who really genuinely enjoys life. And the thing about sports and broadcasting is that it becomes so corporatized that, and there's so many requirements that broadcasters have for announcing. You got to do X, Y, and Z. Bill Wall didn't care about any of that crap. He loved the game. Like, he loved the sport that he was a part of for such a long time. And he loved everything else too. He was interested in so many different things. And he was like, all of these are equally good and equally interesting. And I want to talk about all of that. And I love that mentality. And that's, a lot of people are like, oh, he's just this weirdo on TV and he's commentating on these games. But the truth is that I just think he really genuinely enjoyed everything that he talked about. And he wanted to bring all of that to everybody. And I just loved it, man. I love that part of his personality. And, I don't think he was a weird goofball. I think he was a weird goofball who brought a lot to that profession. And, obviously an incredible basketball player, but I don't know. We need more people like him in sports broadcasting.
He's the only guy that could ever get away with comparing Nikola Jokic to Martin Luther King.
Yeah, that's correct. That's correct.
His quote on Nikola Jokic is like my favorite thing he's ever said.
Yeah.
Like he said, he's a beautiful player who plays a mental game. He has what seems to have been lost in the world, which is peripheral vision. When you walk down the street in life, when you drive a car in life, when you ride a bike in the world on a street, it is staggering the lack of peripheral vision. But Nikola Jokic is the antidote to so many of our problems in the world. When you see someone like a Nelson Mandela or a Martin Luther King or a Mahatma Gandhi, someone who sees the future before anyone else does, knows how to get where they need to be, where they want to be, that is Nikola Jokic. Happiness begins where selfishness ends. I love that.
And he believes it.
line.
Like, that's the beauty of it. He believes every single word of that. And I will miss that so much.
Watching him play basketball is like watching Bob Dylan come up with a song.
Beautiful. I love it. I love it. And he's sincere in all of it. And yeah, I'm gonna miss that dude. And I know a lot of basketball fans and sports fans in general are gonna miss him too. So shout out to him. All the best to his family. He had a huge impact on the broadcasting game. And again, I hope we find more people like him.
And by the way, that quote is from 2018 before Jokic won any MVPs or championships. So in terms of peripheral vision, seeing the future, Bill Walton had that.
That's what I'm saying, man.
Way.
He's not blowing smoke up people's butts. It was him being truly like, he knew what he was talking about. He wasn't some sideshow. He was a smart guy. And I think that's awesome. So that's the Dubcast for this week. Thanks for tuning in. Hey, we got an hour out of nothing. So good for you, George. Good for me, Johnny. I think that was
nothing when you're talking to us.
That's right. That was a fun Dubcast.
We'll draw water out of any stone.
That's right. Thanks for joining us, on this journey, and we'll be back next week to talk about all the amazing comings and goings of Ohio State sports and the larger football and sports world at large. But until then, I'm Johnny.
I'm George.
And we'll see you next time.
Take care, folks.